Alright. So, we're going to be carving a face this week. We got some little chunk of found wood here. It's actually a piece of firewood that I was messing around with, just really nice to carve. Not really sure what the species is, but it's similar to basswood. You can see it's not real thick here, so we're not going to go in too deep on the nose. And it gets thinner as it goes down, so I figure I'm going to place his nose about right here. He's just going to have some really funky hair. So, just to draw, I'll give you guys a little bit of idea what's going to happen here. We'll probably put his eyes about in here, his nose about in there, and then his mouth about in there. Alright, and let's see here, I give you a little bit of shade in there. That's basically what he will look like right there. Okay, and he's going to have a beard, so that'll be about right there. Alright, and his hair is going to be wild. Alright, so let's get going. First I usually draw with a V tool. This nice little, like, kind of in between the 1mm and the really big one. It's maybe like 3mm, 4, I'm not sure. And my tool is sharpened, and any of the cuts, if you're just whittling and not using gouges, whatever, you know, the V tool is basically just going to be, you're making 2 cuts, you know, so instead of this one doing this here, then you're going to make that by going in with a 45-degree cut, one on the other side. Okay, so you can basically get the same thing with a knife as you can with most of the tools. They get a little more complex. It just takes a few more cuts and a little more careful, whatever. And if you, I really suggest, you know, if you're doing carving, to try to start getting into some of the V tools and gouges. They just help so much, and on some of this stuff, when it gets to larger sizes, you almost can't whittle them properly. I look back at some of my stuff, like faces and stuff that I whittled before I'd gotten over to tools, and they were just so rough. I mean, there were so many places where I was just muscling the tool through, scraping, doing whatever I could to try to get the shapes that I wanted. So you can see we already kind of got the basic idea of what's going on with his face. We got his eyes here, his brow line, and we got his nose starting to shape up here. And if you are going to switch over to gouges from whittling, you're probably going to stab yourself, and you just got to get through it. It's just, you know, you're picking up a new tool. It's very similar to learning new chords on a guitar, or learning guitar in general. Every time you learn a new fingering, you know, you just go back to feeling like you're a 1-year-old learning to use your body again, training your hands and muscles, how to grip things and push them and figure out all that stuff. So just be careful when you start. And the other thing is, I mean, you're also, with a knife, you kind of are, your brain is tracking a certain motion of where the blade is and what's safe and what's not. And when you move over to these, it changes to a forward kind of cautionary area. You know, if you're doing this, you can hit. Look, see, I actually did the other day. It was actually with a big tool. I was doing something stupid. But yeah, I'd really suggest picking up a few when you can, even when it's uncomfortable. They'll eventually, I promise, they'll feel just as comfortable as a knife does, and in a lot of areas they'll be much easier. I love the V tools. I think it's one of the most important. You just kind of draw everything in, and this is a really good size to kind of, you can do almost everything with it. When you're doing hair and stuff, some of the details, these top the top of it can kind of start cutting into other things, you know, and then I'll switch over to the little one. So we're getting this face here. He's not going to be super three-dimensional because we don't have a whole lot of wood here. And so you're going to have to describe his three-dimensional features kind of more in a drawing manner or a relief manner. So as long as you have those shadows created to show that there's depth, you know, you'll be okay without it being super deep. Alright, and then I have one gouge. It's just kind of a really shallow gouge, and I'll use this for a little bit of kind of basically the chisel to straighten out some areas that may be a little hard to... Okay, there's a cat here now. We got a cat problem. Anyway, but I also really like to use a really shallow whatever to... You turn it over and you get a nice beautiful kind of rounding and shape going on. This isn't quite shallow enough to get his whole nose, but we'll get it in there later. And this is also, by the way, kind of one of the ways that you finish off the bench. Just kind of basically not using sandpaper and still getting things smoothed and shaped. Alright, so we kind of got this drawing, we got a little bit of depth going for his brow line. We need to bring his nose out a little more. Start shaping this. Oh my god, Cookie. Especially if you're doing it inside, you don't have a special workplace. I'm kind of in my workplace, but obviously the cats don't know that. I should go shut the door probably, but yeah, I mean, cutting yourself is one thing, but you certainly do not want to cut somebody else or your loved ones. And let's see here. Okay, let's get his nose out a little more here. Let's get his beard in there a little bit. Start to do that. Not real graceful cuts, but we are roughing right now. Stop cutting there. Dig that. Alright, so you can see we're kind of getting a bit, even if I wasn't doing a beard, you'd still kind of do this shape that kind of happens for in between the cheeks and the upper lip. And his, where this kind of line is for the mouth can really vary when you're doing beards. Really, you know, anywhere when you're doing carving, it's always much more interesting to have it stylized. So as long as there's a method to your madness, it's okay if you don't have things completely measured out and looking totally realistic. Okay, yeah, that should work out, I think. A bit of a split there. And he's gonna have the wind blowing in his beard too, I think. So his beard's gonna like come over a bit. So I'm trying to switch my hands up so I'll keep you guys out of the process here. Okay. And that's the other thing about the V tool doesn't always curve through the wood like you can get a knife to. which also kind of depends on how hard the wood is too. Alright, it's kind of looking like a weird pug. Okay, then we get the side of his face going here. And then kind of his hairline. Okay, and by the way, when you're using a V-tool, it's hard to always be going in the proper direction of the grain to cut, because when you're making a cut like this, on the top side, you'll be going the correct way, but on the bottom side, you'll be going against the grain. So you kind of make your first cut, if it's going to be a finished cut that's going to show, you make your first kind of divot, and then you go in there and you tilt it to the upper side, and you kind of just cut on that one, and then you come back and you just focus on the bottom part of that cut and tilt it to the other side and cut that one. So both of them are with the grain and nice and smooth. You don't always have to do it. It depends on, you know, what's going on with the wood, how sharp your tools are. And that gets really tough in beards. And in beards, by the way, on direction, in general, you want it to go with the grain. Because when you start getting these little valleys and plateaus that are so small and close to each other, that's really when the wood's going to start to get chewed up. And if you try to do like some curve in a soft wood, it'll usually end up getting torn out. So if you want to do that, or you're just having problems anyway with it tearing, just make it bigger. Make the, you know, again, kind of stylize the hair and have it really large. You know, they don't have to be close together. There's no rules that say that. I've seen some really nice examples of guys doing really stylized beards where they don't do really fine hair. It looks really good. And one of the reasons why it's so hard to get it to do that, even with your tools as sharp as possible. So the reason why that starts to get tough to get those really close lines to work is because on a blade, whatever tool it is, it goes from basically almost infinitely, if it's sharp, narrow to wide. Okay, no matter how thin your blade is or the tool is, it's gonna thicken. Okay, so the cut is made at a really small point, and then the wood gets pushed out to whatever thickness your tool is. And that is what basically, whenever you're making a cut, it's pushing it. And then if it's, the wood can take it, then it won't break. It'll go back into its place after the tool is removed. But if it's not, and there's nothing to back up the wood on the other side, like in these little ones, then it'll just get pushed off and it'll break. So if you're having a problem with details, you don't like that, then move to a slightly harder wood. You know, go to a London plane or sycamore, something that's you can find that is a medium hardness. And those aren't too bad to deal with. They can be, you know, it gets a little more frustrating sometimes. You have to remove a lot of wood. But if it's close enough to what you need, it's really not that bad. It doesn't take a lot more effort or anything to carve out a face and all these little things. And when I moved to like a London plane, which is really close to sycamore, I mean, I just loved it. I mean, I couldn't believe that I'd been carving basswood for so long. Because it just took all the details so wonderfully. And I'm not the most graceful wood carver too, so you know, I have a tendency to get maybe more tear outs than the next guy. Alright, so I'm kind of putting in some of this beard. Doesn't really necessarily need to go in now. We're going to start to show some of this stuff. I'm not worried about this being soft because I'll basically take away all of the what's showing there. You can see it's kind of all disappeared. And let's do some more. And sometimes I'll do that if it's not too big. You know, I'll see what it looks like, and then maybe go in and shape up the beard some more. Okay, so we need to get rid of his unibrow. And okay. Okay, his eyes are too wide. His face is getting too wide for his nose and mouth proportion for my liking. So I'm bringing that in a little bit there. And okay, so we're going to work on this a little more, definitely. But you can see we're not going to go a whole lot deeper. And unlike one of my previous videos on specifically showing how to make a more three-dimensional face, we're not going to have the nose stick out a whole bunch, like I said in the beginning. And you can see from the side, I don't know what your side view is there, that there's almost nothing there. But when you look at him from the front, he looks okay. It looks three-dimensional. And again, that's just kind of halfway in between being two-dimensional and three-dimensional. It's kind of relief stuff where you show the depth just through cues for the brain. And you don't want to think about it too much. You just let your brain figure it out, what looks good. But it's kind of going on there is that the curves are more exaggerated to show kind of perspective in the way a drawing does. And so it's kind of halfway in between both because it is three-dimensional, but it's also kind of cheating in what it's showing. And another way for this to happen, show off three-dimensional stuff, is do it either in painting or to do like kind of an antiquing finish. Let's see, like, I didn't show it very well. I kind of do it with these guys. He has a really big nose, but basically you can see how the crevices are really dark, and that's because using basically one of the antiquing methods, which is basically putting in a dark stain or paint or whatever it is, and then wiping it off so that the plateaus are lighter than the crevices are, the valleys. And sometimes it's a matter of wiping it off, the paint, whatever it is. Sometimes it's a matter of sanding it off. It depends on the wood and what you're using. But definitely look that up. It's a fun method to kind of give your carvings some interesting character, I guess. After you carved it, and if you don't want to do painting, but it's not really sticking out enough, because some of those they don't really look good until you put the finish on them, and then they look great, or to some people. All right, digging his eyes out a little more there, and the top of his eye out. And sometimes on eyes I do the pupils, sometimes I don't. It depends on what the wood can hold, how big it is. Sometimes keeping it clean and stylized can look better than attempting something that's not really possible or not within your skill set. Alright, so I'll start doing some of these eyebrows a little bit. And on eyebrows, you want them to slant a little bit and start to slant more and more as you get to the side. If you have more space, or they stick out more than on the top. Oops. On the top, when you go to this side, then you tilt it even more, and that'll give it kind of a curve. If you're doing bigger stuff or different kind of wood, you can curve the entire brow with one cut. But it's not always possible, so you do it in sections. Now the bottom section, we'll tilt it in even more. Okay, and that'll give it kind of a more complex eyebrow. Oh, he's got a little chunk in there, doesn't he? A little brown chunk. Something in the wood there. That's that line that you see going up there. So yeah, you can see it kind of gives it a little more of a complex feel, even though it's just straight lines. You want to try to make sure that it's the same on both eyebrows. I have a problem with that sometimes. I'll be like exploring on the second eyebrow and forget that it doesn't match. You can see it kind of happen there. It's tilted more than the other one is, but it'll hold. Again, I'm using a small one here, especially on the top, because if I use the big one, the tips of it would be digging in there and making all these marks I couldn't get rid of later. It would be tough to get rid of and keep the cut there. Okay. And you see the eyebrows came down when I did those V-cuts. So you want to leave them kind of bushy at first. I mean, before you do the hair, you know, leave them a big mound, and then you can take it off later. All right, and make his forehead a bit bigger here, and a bit bigger. He's going to kind of be a crazy homeless person with his hair situation here. I mean, by crazy homeless person, I mean a wizard. We can put some ears in here too. Some mild ears. They're going to be kind of stylized, but it's okay. And go down to the end of the nose there. This ear's a lot bigger than that. Okay. I'm just going to define that a little bit. Even though hair does often cover up the ears, we want to show them off. Okay, and then from the back of that line, I'm going to see where top of the other one is. Make sure they're semi-close. People's ears aren't really necessarily symmetrical anyway, so. And we can see that, so we want to take in this side a little bit. Sorry you can't see that. Okay. Okay, so this is kind of the outside of the cheek as well as the beard line. else are we gonna do here? We're gonna bring his eyebrows out a little bit. And one thing you're gonna really help with the depth of your carvings is the forehead and making it really round. And I don't mean the hairline actually, but on the sides, if you really bring it in, it'll really bring out his face. Most of the face isn't real round, but the forehead is. It drops back on the sides. So if you can just show that in there a little bit. Okay. So you can see these are some pretty big strands of hair, but it works. And sometimes you can make the hair too small and too complex. So with the bigger strands, cuts, sometimes it's easier for the viewer to tell what's going on. And when you get down to the beard, you want your strands generally to curve a little bit, even if you don't want to do the wind blowing thing. Just doing a little bit of kind of back and forth stuff. And then also on the beard, kind of all of the hairs have a center point, probably about right here, where they all kind of stem from. And then again, like with the eyebrows, when you go to here, you'll have it change a little bit. So it looks like it's wrapping under. And what else do I need to go over here? I usually have a brush around. I didn't bring it over to my taping studio, but it's good to have either a stiff paintbrush or some sort of toothbrush, and you can get out all this little crap that happens. Also, don't be afraid afterwards to wash. You know, if you get I'll always get my stuff dirty, especially if it takes longer to work on. You just use a little bit of soap and a toothbrush, and it'll clean it right up. You don't want to get it soaking wet or anything, but just a little bit will do it. Took more of his nose off than I wanted, but it's fine. Actually, we're going to shape out a little bit of his nostril here. Oh, went a little far, that's okay. His stylized bloke. Yep, going all the way for the green, that's what happened there. And also on the nose, you can make some definition. Bring the nostrils up a little bit, even though this is already curved. They're kind of a separate little chunk of geometry there on their own. So you can do that, then kind of give it a little more nostril feeling going on. I've seen different. I try to bring my hair all the way up to wherever it's going, and but I've seen. I don't know what book it is, but he was saying that he doesn't, and because it does bring problems. Like you can see in there's that little chunk, and then it's kind of a pain to get it out. You can go through there and cut it, but if you don't like that, if you don't bring it all the way to the top of the lines, and then just have them staggered so that they go, some will get closer to the top than others, basically, and that'll give it the feel of their, excuse me, it's awesome, romantic, give the feel of there being hair to the top. And if you have this problem, you go in there and make a cut, and then come in there like this. And again, if you go in there with a brush, it'll clean out a lot of those little niblets that are still in there. Yes, that's the technical term, is niblets. And again, the beard is another place where some rounding on the edges can really make the difference on making it look more three-dimensional and complete. Another place that we use the gouge upside down to round over some features is on the cheeks here. And you want to make sure that when you start it, you're going with the grain, you're going downhill. Because if you catch it a little before that, it'll chip off your tip, kind of like what you saw me do with the nose. I don't necessarily want to do that. So, there we go. It's a real nice finish to it, to have it round, if you have the proper gouge size, which is usually going to be like a 7 or lower. Probably a 5 or a 3 will handle most of it. It doesn't have to be the exact size. Even if it's rounded even a little bit, it'll give you a better look than the knife will, if you're going for that rounded look. You know, the Scandinavian style of carving is very angular. And I really like that. I kind of definitely incorporate some of that. You know, I leave a lot of the cut marks. I want you to see you know, that this is handmade and what kind of shaped it. And some of it's stylization too. And mastery, I guess, also of the kind of what you're doing. You know, if you can leave it in more simplified terms and still make it look like it's supposed to be like that. Okay, so that's kind of the upside down rounding thing. It does kind of take some of the details out. You know, like we want maybe his eyes to have a little bit of a bag there. So kind of back that up in there on both sides. So it kind of gives them that old bag look. Because if you do the more angular they are, then it's kind of not just that it's less fat content on the face, but when people get old, even without fat content, the skin loses this elasticity, and it kind of just has this round, sunk look anyway. And people really like that in carvings. A good example, if you want to go look at some carvings that show off that kind of sunken fat look, is hell's her name? Nancy Tuttle, that's her name. She uses power tools, and she mostly works in pine knots. But if you look at her stuff, you really see she does a great technique to kind of give the flesh the feeling that it's being affected by gravity and by age too. Okay, and there we're gonna see what it looks like more angled. Let's see when it's, and then you can see it's much lower actually too. It's kind of a problem, but it gives it more like the person has stress in their face instead of just being old when it gets too angular. This isn't bad. It's still kind of roundish, but and again, both of them kind of it depends on what you're looking for. So I'm trying to pretty him up a little bit. His eyes are kind of tilting in a little bit. It's not too big of an issue. We'll bring him back down a little bit on the outside anyway. And they're a little bit wide, so when we do these, we're pulling in his eye a little bit too. It kind of shows off a little bit, shows more of the skull too, because it has that ridge on the outside of the eye. Alright, so I don't want to waste too much time on this, so we're going to go to the hair. You guys can figure out how to do finishing and cleaning up on your own. Damn it! Oh, actually, you know what? We're going to do eyes real quick. I'm going to show you a simple way to do eyes. I would go in there with a V-tool and cut this stuff up, but this is a really soft wood, and it just doesn't, it's not very forgiving when it gets to really small details. If the face was bigger or something, I'd go for it. But this is what I've been using lately for my technique on the eyes. And it's kind of a flip contrast. That instead of having the pupil and the iris being dark, I darken the other parts. I'll show you what I mean by that. Okay, it could be a little cleaner, but sorry for now. Oh my god, can you hear my cat meowing at the door? Poor thing. Okay, see how that worked there? And I don't know if you can see the angle of my cuts, but there's your eye. And so you basically make a cut like this, and then a cut like this. Here, here, and here. And that generally, actually, the bottom's a little bit lower, so that looks more like a round thing there. But that basically gives you the circle, is that you trace the outline of the eyelid, and then you do kind of a 45-degree cut. And that angle kind of basically makes it look like a pupil. Okay? And then instead of drawing or doing a little dot there, because it really doesn't work out because this is on an angle and it's just not really, it's hard to get a little circle in there without having weird lines. So what I've been doing is I'll make a little bit of a chunk out that's dark, and it kind of replicates the there being a catch light, or which is the catch lights are the little lights that happen in the pupil, and that's what makes an eye look good in drawing, is when you have those kind of in there. It breaks up the blackness. So I'll do just a tiny little speck in the middle. It's a little bit off center. I don't think you can do much more than stab it and let the spine go in there. I don't know if you guys can see that. Let's see if I can see here. Okay. See that? Can you see the pupil a little bit? Not really. Okay, well, anyway. So that's what I've been doing for the little ones. It's so hard because it's not just that it's small, but that it's going, it's going sideways of the grain. So it's pretty hard to keep the eyelid intact and go in there with a gouge or do anything more complex than this. This is already kind of pushing the boundaries. We'll do it again over on this one here. I'm tracing the line there, doing it again there. This one didn't go far enough across. And then I do a tilted one like this to connect those cuts and make a little pyramid, upside down pyramid in there. Okay? And do that on both sides. And then it'll give you a little appearance of a round thing going on in the middle. Okay, again there. And sometimes I don't even do this. I'll leave it as just eyelids. These people are just a little bit there. Oh, see that eyelash? The eyelid came up. Okay, and we're back. Alright, I had to go talk to you. I'm getting a battery for the camera. I also got some other guys here to show you some examples. This guy you can really see his pupils, his eyes. Okay, yeah, you see him in there? This is the London plane, like sycamore stuff. So it takes the detail a little better. You can see that it's that, again, the white parts of the eye is what I've made dark. And it seems to work pretty well. Looks natural, I guess. Yeah, so anyway, and this by the way is, this kind of got his wild hairdo. I don't carve the whole thing. Besides the fact that it would just be more hair, it kind of leaves a contrast that I enjoy. Like, hey, this is a piece of wood. And then these guys, just sort of some examples on beard work that you can get a little more complex instead of just doing the straight down like this fellow has. Again, he has a windy beard. It looks decent, and this wood wouldn't have taken this kind of stuff. But you see kind of, you make layers basically, shapes. This is highly stylized, but this is kind of one way, and it's also without making too curvy of stuff. Again, on this guy, this was kind of, because I was messing around with handlebar mustaches, and when I was doing like Santa Clauses, I was having a really hard time curving that hair, because when it would get to this part and go up, it would just tear. Again, the wood takes more detail, but kind of cheat it, and then basically none of it's actually going back up. And not many beards actually do anyway. The handlebar ones do, but they're so thin you wouldn't really be able to carve that. So okay, so enough trying to. Oh, and then this is kind of a little guy that's similar to what I'm working on here. He's more of like a hipster than a wood spirit, with his part in his hair. You can see I did this kind of layering technique on a smaller level. You just kind of think about it like as leaves or something, or flames. See, that's basically flames, right? Anyway, so it does work on a smaller level. You just don't get as involved in it, so you don't tear up the lid. Okay, and back to what we're working on. So his needs some more cleaning up, and that's just gonna take doing more passes when I'm sitting down and maybe a little more relaxed. But we've got most of the main stuff here. Let's see. His face is awful wide. I might end up taking that down quite a bit. He's just very stout looking, which is okay. Bring his beard up to about there. Oh, it's a little dirty. Okay, see. And that you can kind of, if you're having a hard time making it, go into his face, the hair kind of like he is there. Then plenty of people stylize it like this. And I'll get out of that actually. I don't like it. Try to make it at least a little more subtle. Yeah, do you see me pry it off there? So, great technique. Fabulous. All right. Let's finish this up. Or at least kind of finish it up. I want to do some of the hair with you. And, see if there's not anything else I want to really change about it. Yeah, so you guys can see how much I've relied on the V-tool throughout this carving, and it's not just that it's a little bit faster than making two cuts with regular blade, but that every cut's clean. It bottoms out, whereas when you do that with a knife, you get these extra cuts going a little extra distance. I mean, not if you're super technical, but it's just so much easier to get a clean cut and bottom off of it. Since the bottom of the V-tool is, bottom of the V-tool is a really small gouge, basically. Some of the old ones have actual V's, but it's got a little U at the end there. So what are we going to do with the hair? Mostly we're just going to have it start to happen. As far as the patterns, of the hair, you just look at life basically, but it basically all kind of just comes off wherever it is. You just have it kind of come straight off. If it had a vanishing point, like perspective, like we talked about with the beard spout up here, it would be much lower, like maybe here. It doesn't slant as much in most parts. And the wood spirit style of just kind of like wild hair, it's pretty easy to get looking decent, and you just kind of think about it as like rivers all flowing next to each other. You get kind of your first few lines, and you just kind of base the rest of it off of that. Again, I'm not really shaping this before I go in with the V-tool. One reason is because this is really soft wood, so it's not a big of a deal. And also having a bit of funkiness in here will give it some shape on its own. If it was, from a block that I was working with, I would probably shape it some. Kind of like I did with this guy. Not a whole lot, but just enough so he's not a blockhead completely. Not like this guy. He had a bit of tear in the wood anyway. I don't know, he looks kind of silly. I kind of gave him a little bit too much of a widow's peak here. And he looks kind of like a punk rocker or something weird. instead of being a wood spirit. Excuse me, they have a bit more of like a, not much of a hairline, it's kind of a round thing. And some of that's kind of, could be kind of explaining that you're not seeing necessarily the roots of the hair, but instead that it's kind of rounding out and falling a little bit in that curve because it's just so bushy. Oops. Yeah, but if you start putting curves in, which I tried to do on a few to try to make the beards more complex before I kind of figured out this layering thing. If you have, a dip, then it's really hard to get the hair to match up when you're going with the grain on both sides, and especially on multiple ones. So try not to have that, and especially in the middle of some hair. So that's kind of why in this one there's layering at the end of the hair, so you don't have to worry about matching up lines and gouges. And I guess we could put a little bit of a part in his hair over here. We'll say that it kind of tweaks off a little bit like that. And then on the top it'll get a little harder to get that V-tool, or really any cutting material would be going not just against the grain, but on the top. It's the hardest part to get clean cuts. And you can see when I go in, there's too much flat space. I'll go in and make another little gouge in there. The lines don't have to match up. They don't have to go from top to bottom. And it's usually better if they don't. And so you just kind of make your lines for a little bit and then have them die out and then have other ones come around it. Kind of like see starting to happen there. Let's see here. Yeah, this wood's so soft. I mean, I can just put the V-tool in there and it'll shape it as I'm going, putting the hair in. Okay, and you'll see here, see we have this part, and it's like, well, the hair's not coming from there, but it's totally fine, because that's how hair works anyway. It comes up in the middle. You just kind of have it come out. I don't want to be anything to be too extreme. Have things slowly go away from each other. It's still all going up though, as you see there. Okay, so see how they don't match there? We're not going to make them the same line either. We're just going to go in there like that. Kind of do that. I'm going against the grain, so it's tearing. I was trying to show you that there. Here we go. Okay. And let me sharpen my V-tool. Starting to tear out a little bit at the bottom of it. Okay, so you can see how as it goes around, the lines also curve with it, kind of treating each point as a plane of which way, definitely just stab myself, which way the hair is coming out of. This is the brow, this is that, so as it curves, you think of it like this, so the hair goes that way, right? And then around here, you can have it go up, or if there's no beard or something, then you would kind of have it go sideways. And then, as you can see, like these guys, I just kind of have it meet at a certain point. Now, that works better because I don't have anything carved back here. There's no ear or anything. You can see on this one, because he had parted hair, I didn't have long hair, that I gave him kind of sideburns. See, it's not very finished, but you're going to have to find a point in there where you're going to make the distinction between the beard and the face hair. And you can definitely just look at how real humans treat that. Okay, so in here I'll go in an angle, have it go even more inward. Doesn't need to be all there. So you can see it looks like a really furry guy. Yeah, there's too much overlay here. I'll probably bring that back. I'll just do it now here. It's just too much of a shelf for his hair. And you know what? There really doesn't have to be. Let's just show. Let me do this right here. It really doesn't have to be a distinction, I guess. It's kind of be kind of the style. Just have it keep it narrow in for the sideburn and then come back out. And then under the ear. You know, on beards in real life, it's kind of, it would stop here probably and then start up again, or maybe even have like an angle like this, and then you bring that in. But I'm not sure if we want that look on here. I guess I'll do it. I'll try it. You could probably just have it solid hair and have it work out though. See, this is another place where VTOL can clean up really easy without me having to go back in there a million times. And again, if you get your technique down better, practice some chip carving, you get better at that. Making ends meet, which is kind of impossible in the wood world. And as a pun, I mean, you're making money, never mind. So yeah, you can see it's just coming out of the back of his ear. It totally works, it's fine. I'm going uphill, so I'm switch to downhill. And so if I was going to layer this a little more, like you saw on these other guys, I would go in there with my knife and kind of do it with the V tool too. And then basically just make little shelves out of the shapes that you already have there. And I'm going to do this deal. And you'll see also that when you need a dark line in there, you don't have to carve anything out. You can just do a bit of a stab cut and do that. And I'll do that sometimes, like maybe on the other side of the eye. No second cut, no carving, just having that there. I'll need one there, but you can see it gives it like a little bit of darkness. And I have a lot of shadow here, so it's not really necessary, but if it's in a well-lit room, a lot of these shadows are going to go away. And so, you know, under here and stuff, these little lines will really stick out and give it a little bit more depth. I did more than I said there. And then, so back to this thing though, that of making these. I think I'll just do a few of them. Okay, and then you'll go in there, and because you can't just have it sticking out like this. And you don't necessarily need to have the whole thing a stairway. You can just have it fade from, you know, whatever level this is, and then back up to this flat plateau that all the hair is at. Or else you can have the whole thing dropping off, which, you know, that can work too. Maybe neat. And now on this side, we'll bring that down a little bit to show off that little peak. And I just power through it. With your tool there. But then underneath these, you'll kind of have to worry about the hair. You have to work on it coming out of this top piece, because you don't want it to be like going when the lines go to this other layer. You don't want them to be going like with it or anything. You kind of want to make them look like they're coming straight out from underneath it. So you want to be really careful and have it curve in, even if you don't think the beard is doing that. It'll give the eye that cue, and then also overlap them too, so that they're not, the points aren't all coming out of the other points. Sorry if I'm not making a lot of sense there. Okay. And this looks kind of bad here, but you can see what the end technique is supposed to bring. And you can have the hair go straight down to the end. Like on this one, I tried to curve it up, curve it to the side, so it kind of looks like he's sitting on his beard a little bit. On this little one's probably not going to look normal, so I'll just skip that. Yeah, boy, I'm just rushing through this too much. They're making a crap job of it. That's okay. Oh, I almost cut myself. Okay, so I wanted to get through most of it with you guys, and I think we've gotten close enough. We've gone over most of the basics. Yeah, definitely feel free to ask me any questions about carving in general, tools, sharpening, projects. If you'd like to see me do something, demonstrate something. And check out my blog if you get bored on personal work. Just schpoingle, same as my YouTube name. At Blogspot, or however they do that. It'll be in the description. Alright, I want to get rid of that right there. Okay, so we're going to a point. Right, well, he's a stocky fellow, but that'll do. I'll conclude a picture after I've worked on it a little more. Alright, guys. Be safe carving, have fun.